Think back to your own education for a second.
Right.
When you picture those years, you probably visualize a syllabus, right? A neat, organized checklist of knowledge. Like math is at 8 in the morning, science at 9, history right after recess.
Right, yeah. The classic schedule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are conditioned to think of schooling as this very straightforward delivery system. But, I mean, what if the most influential lessons you absorbed during those thousands of hours were never actually printed on a syllabus?
Well, the assumption is always that a school just packages up a specific set of facts, right? They hand that package to the student, and the student simply unwraps it.
Yeah.
But when you look at the actual mechanics of education, that delivery system is incredibly complex. It's a highly engineered environment operating on multiple, often invisible layers.
And pulling back the curtain on that environment is our mission for this deep dive.
Mhm.
Today, we are working through a comprehensive reviewer for the Philippine Licensure Examination for Teachers.
Specifically zeroing in on the module for curriculum development, yeah.
Right. We are decoding the hidden architecture of schooling to understand how what we are taught, and exactly how we are taught, is engineered behind the scenes. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the word curriculum itself.
It's a big word.
It is, and we can quickly bypass the narrow original Latin definition, which is carrere. That just means like a race course to run.
Yeah, a bit too literal for us today.
Way too literal. A modern functional understanding of curriculum goes way beyond just jumping the hurdles of middle school, or passing a list of classes.
Oh, far beyond. Professional educators operate on a much broader definition. It is the totality of learning experiences that a learner has under the guidance of a school.
Totality is the key word there.
Exactly. It encompasses both the meticulously planned activities and the entirely unplanned interactions. Every single thing a school influences is part of the curriculum.
Which is, quite frankly, a massive paradigm shift for you, the listener. Because if you are someone who loves to learn, understanding how a curriculum is built is essentially the ultimate cheat code.
Oh, I like that. A cheat code.
It really is. It reveals exactly how your own brain was systematically trained to process information literally from the moment you stepped into kindergarten.
Yeah, and to grasp that architecture, we first have to recognize how a curriculum fractures, because it is never a solid, unbroken monolith.
Right.
There is a staggering gap between what administrators sitting in an office plan and what a student sitting at a desk actually walks away with.
Let's trace how that fracture happens, actually, because education scholar John Goodlad mapped this out into 5 distinct levels of curriculum. And at every single handoff, something gets lost or altered or added.
It's like a game of telephone.
Yes, exactly. So first, you have the ideal curriculum. This is what researchers and subject matter experts propose.
The perfect scenario.
Right. Then it becomes the formal curriculum, which is the official framework mandated by the state or the school board.
And then comes the perceived curriculum. This is how the individual teacher actually interprets those mandates.
Which is a huge variable right there.
Massive. Because next is the operational curriculum, meaning what the teacher actually manages to physically teach in the classroom. And finally, you get the experience curriculum, which is what the student actually internalizes.
I actually like to picture this whole process like a restaurant.
Okay, let's follow that analogy.
So the formal curriculum is the menu. It's glossy, idealized, and it promises this perfectly balanced farm-to-table meal, right?
Sounds delicious.
Right. But the operational curriculum, the taught curriculum, is what the stressed-out line cook actually manages to throw together on a slammed Friday night when half the ingredients are out of stock and the kitchen is practically on fire.
That is painfully accurate for a lot of teachers, honestly.
I bet. And the experience curriculum, that is how the meal actually tastes to the customer, which depends entirely on their individual palate, how hungry they are, and whether they even have a taste for that type of cuisine in the first place.
The restaurant framework captures the reality of the classroom perfectly. Like, if researchers design an ideal 3-week unit on the scientific method, the state might mandate a formal 2-week version.
They cut it down.
Yeah. And then a teacher might perceive that they only have time to cover the core definition, so operationally, they just deliver a 3-day lecture.
Wow.
And by the time it reaches the student, the experience curriculum might just be the memorization of a single vocabulary word. The gap is just massive.
And operating inside that gap brings us to perhaps the most fascinating concept in the entire educational space, which is the hidden curriculum.
Oh, this is a big one.
It is. Philip Jackson coined this term in the late 60s to describe the unintended lessons, values, and norms that students absorb just by existing in the ecosystem of a school.
Right. It's a culture.
Exactly. Like, if a school enforces rigid zero-tolerance hallway rules, students are learning a profound lesson about conformity and obedience, even though there's obviously no class on the schedule called Conformity 101.
What's fascinating here is that the hidden curriculum wields such immense power precisely because it operates completely invisibly.
Right. You can't see it on paper.
Exactly. It is never explicitly acknowledged, which means it cannot be formally debated, assessed, or easily reformed. But it fundamentally rewires a student's worldview. And operating right alongside it is another invisible force, the null curriculum.
The null curriculum.
Yeah, conceptualized by Elliot Eisner.
The null curriculum being what the school explicitly chooses not to teach, right?
Yes. The omission itself becomes the lesson. If a formal curriculum completely ignores, say, personal finance or mental health or local indigenous history, it is implicitly signaling to the student that these subjects have no value in the real world.
Wow.
The null curriculum limits a learner's perspective through deliberate exclusion.
So if the null and hidden curricula are constantly running in the background, shaping our worldview without our consent, we really have to ask who is deciding what goes into the formal conscious curriculum in the first place.
Yeah, who's behind the wheel?
Exactly. What is the philosophical engine driving those decisions?
Well, curriculum developers rely on 4 foundational pillars: philosophy, psychology, society, and subject matter. Any cohesive design has to balance all 4 of those.
But the philosophy part is where the fireworks happen.
Oh, absolutely. The philosophical foundation is where the deepest conflicts arise, because it attempts to answer the ultimate unanswerable questions. What knowledge is actually worth knowing? And what kind of human being are we trying to mold?
That's heavy. And historically, educators split into distinct philosophical camps to answer that. Let's look at the old guard first. You have perennialism.
The classics.
Right. Perennialism argues that human nature is constant, so education should focus on timeless, universal truths. Think Plato, Aristotle, the great books.
Yeah, very traditional.
And right next to it is essentialism, which focuses on the direct instruction of a traditional academic core. Reading, writing, arithmetic, just the essential facts needed to be a productive citizen. In both of these, the student is essentially viewed as an empty vessel waiting to be filled with established knowledge.
Then came the rebellion against that traditional model, which was primarily driven by John Dewey's progressivism.
Dewey changed everything.
He really did. Progressivists argued that education should not be the passive transmission of ancient facts. It should be deeply grounded in the child's actual immediate experience.
So learning by doing.
Exactly. This is the birthplace of learning by doing, using real-life problem solving rather than just rote memorization.
And from there, the philosophies fracture into even more radical territory. You have Reconstructionism, which views the school purely as an instrument for social change.
Like fixing society.
Right. The point of learning isn't just to understand the world, but to fix its inequalities, poverty, environmental degradation. And finally, there's existentialism, which completely rejects external mandates. It argues that education should be entirely centered on the individual's self-actualization and personal freedom.
And you have to realize these philosophies dictate the physical reality of the classroom.
How so?
Step into an essentialist school and you will find desks bolted in straight rows with the teacher lecturing at the front. Step into a progressivist school and the room is likely organized in collaborative pods with students moving freely to engage with physical materials.
I have to push back on the old guard, though. Looking at perennialism, focusing strictly on the great books of antiquity seems incredibly limiting today.
The common critique, yeah.
Doesn't elevating classical, predominantly Western works automatically create a massive null curriculum? I mean, by insisting that only ancient wisdom matters, you are implicitly excluding modern voices, diverse cultures, and contemporary realities.
That tension is exactly why modern educational frameworks have largely abandoned strict perennialism. Modern systems, including the Philippine K-12 system, lean heavily toward progressivism and its psychological counterpart, constructivism.
Right, instructing their own knowledge.
Yes, constructivism operates on the premise that learners must actively build their own understanding by filtering new information through their past experiences, rather than just passively receiving absolute truths from an authority figure.
Okay, so assuming a society aligns on a progressivist philosophy, someone actually has to sit down and draw up the blueprints. They have to translate that philosophy into a tangible, year-long plan.
Right. Which brings us to the architects of curriculum. Historically, there are two dominant models for this construction, and they represent a fundamental clash over who should hold the power in education.
Let's hear them.
The first is Ralph Tyler's rationale from 1949. Tyler proposed a highly logical, linear, top-down approach. He argued that curriculum development must answer four questions sequentially. First, what are the educational objectives? Second, what learning experiences will achieve those objectives? Third, how do we organize those experiences? And fourth, how do we evaluate the results?
It is an incredibly behavioral, product-oriented model. Start with the desired output, design the assembly line, and measure the final product.
That's a great way to put it.
And in Tyler's system, those initial objectives are formulated by administrators and subject matter experts at the very top of the hierarchy, then handed down to the classroom teachers to execute.
Yes, very top-down. Conversely, Hilda Taba developed the grassroots approach, which completely inverted Tyler's model.
She flipped it.
She did. Taba believed that curriculum should be inductive and bottom-up. Instead of starting with abstract objectives dictated by a remote administrator, you start with the classroom teacher diagnosing the specific, immediate needs of the actual learners sitting right in front of them.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this in terms of running a massive business. Tyler's rationale is like a corporate CEO sitting in a skyscraper, setting a rigid company-wide strategy for every single franchise location in the country.
Right.
Whereas Taba's grassroots model is like a local store manager ordering inventory based entirely on what the specific customers in their neighborhood are asking for that week.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. And the reason this distinction is so heavily emphasized in the exam reviewer is because it highlights the eternal tug-of-war in education, standardization versus localization.
The big debate.
Exactly. A Tyler model ensures every third grader in the country is exposed to the exact same content on the same day, which is highly efficient for national testing. A Taba model sacrifices that uniformity to allow teachers to deeply tailor the content to the cultural and psychological realities of their specific students.
We can actually see how these massive philosophical and structural debates collide in the real world by looking at the Philippine K-12 reform, which was mandated by the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013.
Oh, this was a tectonic shift for their system.
It really was. They expanded basic education to 12 years and entirely restructured the progression.
The introduction of senior high school is probably the most visible change, creating highly specialized tracks for students.
Wow.
Instead of a generalist approach, students choose tracks focused on academics, which encompasses science, business, and humanities, or they opt for technical vocational training, sports, or the arts. This specialization allows the curriculum to directly interface with society's economic needs.
But the shift in the early years is arguably more fascinating from a psychological perspective, because they implemented mother tongue-based multilingual education for kindergarten through grade 3.
Yes, which is a profound application of cognitive psychology.
How so?
Well, if you force a 6-year-old to learn a complex new concept, say addition, while simultaneously forcing them to learn the entirely new language of English, their cognitive load just maxes out.
Too much processing at once.
Exactly. They fail at both. By establishing fundamental literacy and numeracy in the child's mother tongue first, the curriculum works with the brain's natural processing limits before introducing Filipino and English.
That makes total sense. And that plays right into another major psychological framework they utilized, which is Jerome Bruner's spiral curriculum.
Ah, Bruner.
Yeah, Bruner argued that you shouldn't just teach a topic once, test it, and forget it. You introduce a fundamental concept early in a highly simplified visual way.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So you teach fractions in grade 3 using, like, physical slices of pizza. Then in grade 5, you spiral back to fractions, but deeper, introducing unlike denominators. In grade 7, the spiral hits again, transitioning into abstract algebraic fractions. The student continuously circles the same vertical axis, but the conceptual depth increases with every rotation.
It is an elegant design, but, real-world crises inevitably test these pristine models. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Education had to rapidly develop MLCs, which stands for Most Essential Learning Competencies.
Oh, right. Because of the lockdowns.
Yeah. With schools shut down and learning fractured, developers had to ruthlessly prioritize. They stripped the curriculum down to the absolute bare minimum skills required for a student to survive the next grade level.
Which raises a really interesting question. If a global pandemic forced developers to strip away massive chunks of the curriculum to isolate just the most essential competencies, and students still managed to fundamentally progress, Doesn't that imply that pre-pandemic curriculum was severely bloated?
That's a fair point.
Like, did COVID inadvertently fix the curriculum scope by cutting out all the non-essential fluff?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a societal crisis forces a rapid, brutal reevaluation of what a culture truly values.
Yeah.
You were touching on the concept of scope, which is one of the 4 core organizing principles of curriculum design.
Right.
Scope dictates the breadth and depth of the content. Developers constantly battle between a wide scope, covering 100 topics an inch deep, versus a narrow scope, covering 10 topics a mile deep. The MLLCs were a masterclass in forcefully narrowing the scope.
Those organizing principles are basically the gears that keep the whole machine running. You have scope, which is the breadth, sequence, which is the logical order, whether chronological or moving from simple to complex, continuity, which is that vertical repetition we saw in Brenner's spiral, and integration, which is the horizontal connection across subjects.
Yeah, making sure things line up.
Right, like making sure the physics concepts align with the math concepts being taught in the very same week.
And if those 4 gears aren't perfectly synchronized, the curriculum shatters. To prevent that, the text emphasizes Wiggins and McTighe's understanding by design, commonly known as backward design.
Backward design.
Yeah, this is a massive paradigm shift for educators. Traditionally, a teacher might ask, what fun activity can we do on Tuesday? Backward design says you must start at the absolute end.
With the final goal.
Exactly. Stage 1 is identifying the exact desired result. Stage 2 is determining what assessment will definitively prove the student achieved that result. Only then do you reach stage 3, which is planning the daily instruction. It is literally writing the final exam before you have even met the students.
It forces ultimate intentionality. And once that instruction happens, you have to evaluate if the entire system actually worked. The standard framework for this is Stufflebeam's CIPP model.
Right. CIPP evaluates the curriculum from 4 pragmatic angles. Context, meaning what is the actual need in this environment? Input, what resources do we realistically have? Process, how's the implementation going? And product, did we achieve the goal?
The power of CIPP is how it isolates failure. Say a district wants to boost literacy, so they buy thousands of iPads. That's the input. But they never bother to train the teachers on how to use the educational software.
Classic mistake.
Yep. The process is broken. So in the end of your reading scores stay flat, which is the product. The district knows exactly where the architecture failed. It wasn't bad technology, it was a failed process.
So what does this all mean?
Hey, that is my line.
Oops.
But truly, what does all of this boil down to? One critical concept: alignment. Every single element, the underlying philosophy, the daily instruction, and the final assessment must point in the exact same direction. The text highlights the absolute tragedy of a misaligned curriculum.
It happens all the time.
It does. Imagine a school deeply committed to progressivism. A teacher designs a brilliant, collaborative 3-week project focused entirely on critical thinking. But at the end of the unit, the district mandates a standardized, multiple-choice test based entirely on behaviorism, assessing only the rote recall of isolated facts and dates through conditioned response.
The misalignment is fatal. The instruction valued critical analysis, but the assessment valued sheer memorization. The tools of behaviorism fundamentally cannot measure the goals of progressivism.
And the students instantly recognize the hypocrisy, right? They realize the critical thinking didn't actually matter, only the memorization did. This misalignment is the primary engine behind Goodlad's gap. It is exactly why the intended curriculum so rarely matches the experienced curriculum. When the system sends contradictory messages, the student's effort is completely misdirected.
And when alignment fails, the evaluation data you collect is worse than useless. It is misleading. You are effectively measuring the wrong variables.
This exploration completely reframes the concept of education. Decoding the hidden architecture reveals that a curriculum is never just a neutral list of subjects. It is a highly engineered, sometimes conflicting matrix of philosophies, cognitive models, and societal priorities.
It's a balancing act.
It is. And constantly operating in the shadows are the hidden and null curricula, quietly dictating what we value and what we ignore.
Recognizing that architecture allows us to see that every classroom layout, every standardized test question, and every omitted historical event is a deliberate choice made by someone trying to shape the future of a society.
And for you, the listener, understanding these frameworks is an incredible tool because you don't have to wait for an institution to hand you a syllabus anymore.
You really don't.
You can build your own. You can intentionally design your own spiral curriculum for whatever subject you want to master.
Mm.
You can establish your own scope and sequence, ensuring your inputs align with your desired outputs.
You step out of the role of the passive receiver and become the active architect of your own learning.
But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. We spend a lot of time on the experience curriculum. The reality that what a student actually absorbs depends on their prior knowledge, their home life, their motivation. But if no two humans have the exact same background or the exact same psychological makeup, is a standardized curriculum even a real thing? Or when the bell rings and everyone goes home, is every single learner ultimately experiencing a curriculum of one? Something to mull over the next time you encounter a perfectly neat printed syllabus.